It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Britain on the brink of military action in the Middle East after Rishi Sunak summons his cabinet to an unscheduled evening call. Iran seizes an oil tanker in the Gulf and its Houthi allies launch another missile attack on shipping lanes. Airstrikes from American and British forces could begin tonight. Also on Sky News at 10, questions for the questioners. The investigators who interrogated hundreds of sub-postmasters using a faulty computer system in the inquiry spotlight.
I have no reason to suspect at the time that there was anything wrong with the Horizon system because we've not been told.
Until we get an answer to say everything's abolished, everything's overturned, I've got to live with it. I'm still under that pressure.
On the eve of his latest day in court, we hear from one convicted sub-postmaster who says he'll believe in compensation when he sees it. Plus, Israel's Gaza war in the dock as the world's top court hears claims its leaders' statements may have encouraged genocide. In recovery, we see inside the NHS after the longest strike in its history. The royal honour for the rugby duo, scoring millions in funds and awareness for the impact of motor neurone disease. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Rishi Sunak held a call with his cabinet tonight as the UK appears on the brink of military action against Iranian-backed rebels in the Middle East. It follows the launch of another missile into the region's shipping lanes by the Yemen-based Houthis, despite a warning from the US and the UK, as well as a United Nations resolution. The Houthis' sponsors in Iran also ratcheted up the tension, seizing an oil-laden tanker in the Gulf previously involved in a dispute between America and Iran. We'll hear the latest on the British and US government's intentions in a moment. But first, our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, reports.
Expectations are growing that Britain is about to launch military action against Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen after the Prime Minister chaired a meeting with his cabinet. Any such move against Houthi targets would be alongside the United States and other allies. The likelihood of strikes rose after British and US forces shot down a barrage of drones and missiles in the Red Sea on Tuesday night, fired by the Houthis despite a clear warning not to. They launched another ballistic missile today, this time against international shipping in the Gulf of Aden. No one was hurt. Ratcheting up tensions further, Iran then seized this tanker off the coast of Oman. The Greek-flagged St. Nicholas vessel was boarded by armed men and steered towards Iran, along with a crew of 18 Filipinos and one Greek.
We condemn this apparent seizure. The Iranian government should immediately release the ship and its crew. These provocative and unacceptable actions need to stop. We'll continue to work with our allies and partners to deter and confront the full range of Iran's concerning and destabilizing behavior in close coordination, of course, with the international community.
Experts saw the seizure as part of a bigger power play.
It may cause them to split their resources, use their carrier aircraft in another area, for example. So, yeah, there's definitely an intention behind the Iranians with regards to this boarding today of that tanker, to switch attention away from the Red Sea and towards the Persian Gulf.
It's the first time Iran has targeted a ship in the Gulf of Oman since Israel declared war on Iranian-backed Hamas militants in Gaza on the 7th of October. That crisis had already triggered a threat to ships transiting the Red Sea after the Houthis started targeting vessels there in November. The crucial Red Sea trading route passes through the Suez Canal. It's used by 15% of global shipping. As for the Strait of Hormuz, it's a critical oil choke point and has previously been used by Iran as a way to pressurize the US and its allies. Back in 2019, Iranian forces targeted multiple ships in this region, including the British-flagged oil tanker, the Stena Impero. Seeking to prevent the war in Gaza from triggering a wider Middle East conflict, the US has moved 2 carrier strike groups to the region. The UK has also mobilised forces, including warships and aircraft. It means the ability to launch attacks is already in place, in case the order is given. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
So the question tonight seems when, not if, military action against the Houthis in Yemen is taken. Our deputy political editor Sam Coates is in Downing Street and our US correspondent James Matthews is in Washington, D.C. for us. Sam, to you first of all, how close are we to military action tonight?
Well, Gillian, there has been no formal announcement or briefings from anyone in the building behind me about what's about to happen. But to be honest, Downing Street, the government machine, couldn't have been clearer that something is up. That emergency cabinet at 7:45, the briefings to senior Labour Party figures, summoning in the Speaker. Those are the sorts of things that you do on the brink of military action. And we know from the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, he was telling us to watch this space just yesterday. And Rishi Sunak talking to local leaders about, including the President of Egypt, about the need for Britain to defend its interests in the Gulf. All of that points to military action. And if they're making that clear, that military action is likely to come soon, because you wouldn't want to give the Houthi rebels too much advance notice of what's about to happen. Expectation possibly tonight, next few hours, that there will be some kind of military intervention. But why has he done that? Why has Rishi Sunak consulted quite widely this evening, even if he hasn't talked publicly? That, Gillian, is because this is a big moment for him. It's his first authorization of new military action, and there are risks. There are risks about where that he targets. There are risks about whether or not he might end up dragging in Iran, which backs the Houthis, into a wider conflict. And there is the risk that this military action doesn't deter the Houthis and that those shipping lanes continue to be blocked by these pirates. All of that will be weighing on his mind, so he wants as wide as possible coalition backing him. He will find out soon whether it was the right strategy.
OK, well, let's cross to James in Washington. And James, we heard America's response to Iran's seizure of the oil tanker. The world's biggest military power's hand, it would seem, has now been forced.
Yeah, there has to come a point, presumably, Gillian, when the rhetoric, the warnings of retribution have to be carried through and followed through with direct action. President Biden has come under pressure from inside the Pentagon and from others. Criticism that he has been too weak, too slow to assert American power and reinforce American deterrence in the Red Sea and surrounds. There was a leak recently from the US military. Now, if there is to be an attack, this provided a list of what looks, to all intents and purposes, like a hit list. It included missile sites, ammunition silos and various other military targets inside Yemen. If that is indeed a hit list, it would suggest the targeting of military sites with a view to minimising or avoiding civilian casualties. It's a difficult one for Joe Biden. To do something is to reinforce and to reassert his stature as a potential power broker. But there clearly is the risk of escalation. And to go down the road to target Iranian-backed militia, then that takes him and his allies further down the road to Iran. There's also concern here that if he did nothing, then that may offer encouragement to other potential foes like China in the context of Taiwan. OK, James, thank you. Let's bring matters back to the UK now and the Post Office. And for years, the Post Office's investigators struck terror into hundreds of sub-postmasters as they investigated them for alleged theft, fraud and false accounting relating to the Horizon scandal. Well, today, one of those investigators was himself under interrogation
at the resumed official inquiry. Stephen Bradshaw said he was just a small cog in the process and that he wasn't an expert in the computer system at fault. Our correspondent Adele Robinson was there.
In the shadow of the Aldwych Post Office, scrutiny of that same British institution. After politicians pass their judgment, the statutory inquiry starts its next phase. And this time, the investigator becomes the investigated. Stephen Bradshaw worked for the Post Office, questioning sub-postmasters over missing money from their branches.
And nothing but the truth. The investigations were done correctly.
He denies bullying, lying and knowledge of issues with Horizon, the faulty computer software which led to hundreds of wrongful convictions.
Each solitary, quite often terrified sub-postmaster sitting across an interview desk from you or one of your team would have been told that they were the only ones with a problem. Isn't that right?
I've never said that to anybody. I've interviewed that you're the only one that has this issue. I have never said that, and I will stick to that.
When you were either giving or prepared to give expert evidence, Mr. Bradshaw, the problems with Horizon were obvious, weren't they?
I've said before, and I will say it again, I am not an expert on the Horizon system.
It just was important for me to look him in the eye.
Watching his evidence, Shazia, who lost her home, narrowly escaped prosecution and describes feeling intimidated.
Where's the money, Shazia? What have you done with the money? Where is the money? He grew increasingly frustrated with me and then even swore at me as well. I was all by myself, single mum with 2 children, very frightened, didn't know what the future held for me. And yeah, I'm emotional.
Will you finally deliver justice for the postmasters?
This week, the Prime Minister announced new legislation to overturn convictions and offer compensation. Joe Hamilton was convicted of false accounting and says the campaign group isn't satisfied with government action.
They need to fast track, and I mean fast track. People are older now. We're all 20 years older than we were. And some people will be getting towards the end. Why shouldn't they have their money back at the very least and a comfortable retirement? You know, we're not asking for millions.
And it's easy to forget that all this has been going on for 3 years, an inquiry that began back in 2021, but now with increasing political heat and a renewed focus.
Including on the Post Office itself and its drive to use powers to privately prosecute.
The fundamental conflict of interest was that the Post Office was the victim who had supposedly lost the money, and the victim had the power to investigate and prosecute people. So there's a total conflict of interest there.
The inquiry continues, but this time it's different. Public momentum's behind it, with accountability at the forefront. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, Post Office investigators like Stephen Bradshaw were certainly busy over the course of the Horizon scandal. Between 1999, when the system was first introduced, and 2015, when the Post Office stopped prosecutions, 700 sub-postmasters and mistresses were prosecuted, about 1 a week. All of them were private prosecutions, which enable companies and individuals to take legal action. There is evidence of the Post Office investigating and prosecuting since 1683, with a dedicated unit which had financial incentives for successful prosecutions. More than 280 other cases were brought by other legal bodies, like the Crown Prosecution Service and the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland, where private prosecution laws differ. Our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, spoke to 2 of the victims there.
I set it all up to go and commit suicide. I come back and I told my wife it's finished. I said, I can't live with this. I said,
scarred by a scandal, crimes he did not commit.
I was going about ashamed and couldn't look at people, couldn't speak to people, and basically kept myself in the 4 walls.
Rab has been living a grim existence after being convicted for shortfalls in the faulty Horizon system during his time running the local post office.
It kept going up and up to 10,000, 15,000, up to 60,000 eventually. It come the day that I was to find out what was going to happen to me. 2 minutes before I was due to go in and see the judge, my lawyer turned around and said to me, just plead guilty And I said, no. I said, I don't plead guilty. I said, I've not done nothing wrong. I said, I've told you this for day one. I know, he said, but it'll be easier for you and your family.
Rab was one of around 100 people given a criminal record here in Scotland, and so far only 4 have had their convictions overturned. The difference here is that unlike in England and Wales, where the Post Office was acting as a private prosecutor, here it's the Public Prosecution Service in Scotland who were pursuing cases, and it's emerged that it first became aware of issues with Horizon in 2013, but it didn't stop chasing cases until 2015.
During that time, here was Louise in her post office near Glasgow. It was 2014. She was hit with demands to make up a £44,000 loss. She was never convicted and believes it was down to authorities knowing the system was flawed.
It's disgusting. At that time as well, we sold our car. We're just, as I say, we're lucky. We've got the family that we have that supported us, and my husband and I have just battled through all of it.
That hard-fought battle continues for Rab, despite a government commitment all convictions will be quashed. Tomorrow, his case is being heard in court.
Because the pressure is really mounting on me now, especially with the government coming out and saying they're going to look into it and overturn them, but I've still got to go to court until we get an answer to say everything's abolished, everything's overturned. I've got to live with it. I'm still under that pressure.
Conor Gillis, Sky News in Clackmannanshire.
Statements made by Israel's Prime Minister and President were cited as evidence of encouragement to genocide today at a controversial case heard by the world's top court. The judges at the International Court of Justice are hearing evidence brought by South Africa and are being asked to order an end to Israel's assault in Gaza. Israel has vehemently denied the allegations. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports from The Hague.
It is a big moment in this war and a dark one in the history of Israel. For the first time, the Jewish state in the world's court facing charges of genocide. Allegations directed by South Africa at every level of Israel's government.
We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters. The Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials and foot soldiers.
South Africa played the court video evidence. It says shows genocidal incitement by Israelis.
Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country.
From Israel's Prime Minister down, the court heard officials encourage genocide. And Israeli soldiers responded willingly, South Africa claims. The outcome of Israel's campaign has been genocidal levels of death and destruction in Gaza, South Africa told the court. This week, our team in Gaza filmed these pictures showing the extraordinary destruction there.
It could take years for judges here to reach a final ruling on this charge of genocide, but that is not the immediate danger for Israel. What it fears most at the moment is a provisional ruling imposing a ceasefire on its war in Gaza that it says is vital to neutralise the threat of Hamas.
Relatives of Israeli hostages still held in Gaza have looked on with anger here, that it's Israel in court and not Hamas.
They came to our houses and killed them and took my father, 75-year-old sick man, and took it out. I don't know if he's alive, and tried to burn my sister with my nephews inside. So this is genocide, not what we're doing. We're protecting ourselves.
Israel says South Africa's action is politically motivated, something its justice minister denies.
This is not politics. It's about the human life that is being lost in Gaza, of young children, elderly, of an entire population that is being deprived of civil services, water, infrastructure that is being destroyed.
The war is polarising global opinion. Outside the court, protests from both sides. Palestinians hope the judges could end this war. Israel's lawyers up next in court hope to head off the threat of a ruling that could also brand their nation a potentially genocidal state. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, the International Court of Justice in The Hague.
The Home Office has said they've not detected anyone trying to cross the Channel illegally for 25 days. It's the longest period of no detected crossings since February 2020, after the UK experienced a period of storms and cold temperatures. The former US President Donald Trump defied the judge at his civil trial in New York today and spoke in court without being given permission. The judge had been trying to find out if Mr. Trump would stick to guidelines restricting him to only talking about the trial. But he began speaking anyway and was then cut off by the judge. And the former England football manager Sven-Göran Eriksson has said he has a year to live at best after being diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The 75-year-old said the progress of the disease can be slowed, but he can't be operated on. In recent weeks, the NHS has had to put up with the winter, COVID, flu and the longest strike in its history. Today, we saw the impact inside one hospital in Berkshire. It means extra cost, says one of its executives, as well as potentially working with providers outside the NHS. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, reports from Reading.
It is tough at the moment. It's hard. There's been a cumulative effect on the senior, medical team and the nursing team and the management team in the hospital from the strikes.
Dr. Omar Nafusi has just led his emergency department through the longest strike in NHS history. These past few weeks might not have been as grim as some had predicted, but the strain on his staff is being felt.
We want to treat patients who come through the front door in a timely manner. We want to give patients a good experience. We want to get back on the elective. We want to get back on the cancer targets. We want to get outpatient appointments back. We want people to come to the NHS and get the service they deserve.
The strikes before Christmas and after New Year have added more than 200,000 appointments and procedures to the waiting list. It's devastating for patients and for hospitals, which had started to make progress on a record 7.6 million long list.
We need our teams to work even harder than they have before and go the extra mile. Sometimes that means extra cost, paying them to work additional hours, additional theatre lists, more clinics. Sometimes it might mean working with the independent sector.
Hospitals have been helped by a mild flu season, which, along with intense planning, has helped to reduce the impact of industrial action.
The hospital is obviously very busy, but the pressure doesn't seem as intense as it has on my previous visits, and that's despite this unprecedented industrial action. It's due in part, at least, to the milder winter, but the warning is things can change very quickly.
Patients like Stephen Rogers can have increasingly complex care needs. He has myasthenia gravis, a neuromuscular disease. He's been in and out of hospital 4 times in 4 months.
You've got patients coming into A&E, being moved to beds, and everything just seemed to be manic, and they didn't have time to breathe. So I would say staffing, more staff would probably take pressure off them.
The NHS has weathered the winter storm so far, but it faces a long list of challenges. Removing the uncertainty and instability of more industrial action will help. Ashish Joshi, Sky News at the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading.
The number of women dying during pregnancy or soon after childbirth has reached the highest level in almost 20 years. Between 2020 and 2022, the maternal death rate increased to 13.4 deaths per 100,000 pregnancies. Amongst black women, the rate fell slightly, but is still 3 times higher than for white women. Lisa Dowd spoke to one family who lost a loved one.
Family was most important to her. Her children were most important to her in her life.
The shock of losing her sister just after she'd given birth to a healthy baby girl has never left Wendy. Susie McLaughlin was already mum to 3 boys, but in 2019, following a caesarean section, she died.
She was absolutely petrified. She'd never had an operation, she'd never been in theatre or anything before. But then The baby was born, and then she just said, oh, thank God, took a deep breath, and that was it. She went straight into a cardiac arrest. Her body had just shut down.
An inquest found that doctors missed opportunities to diagnose Susie with a rare condition that causes high blood pressure in the heart and lungs. The number of women dying during pregnancy or soon after has increased to its highest level for 20 years, with 13 deaths per 100,000 women in the UK.
We can see from the figures that there are particular increases in, for example, deaths of women from blood clots. And we know that in many instances, those blood clots are occurring in women who are overweight and obese. But we also can see signs of maternity systems under pressure.
Bereaved families have called for a national inquiry into maternity care following scandals at NHS trusts across England. And though the picture for women from black ethnic backgrounds has improved a little, they and women from deprived areas are still the worst affected.
I think it's quite sad that as a black woman walking into a hospital, walking into a maternity services, I am 3 times more likely to die than my white counterpart who may be walking in at the same time as me.
NHS England says investment has increased to grow its maternity workforce, strengthen leadership and improve culture. But critics say that change is not happening fast enough. Lisa Dowd, Sky News.
Rob Burrow and Kevin Sinfield last shared a rugby pitch together 8 years ago. Since then, Rob has been diagnosed with motor neurone disease, and the two of them have united to increase awareness and raise millions to tackle the condition. Today, they were honoured for it by Prince William, as our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
This is a bit of a picture board of trophies that have been won.
If you get a gong, most wait for an invite to the palace. But not this pair. Royalty came to them.
Who's got the most tries out of you two? Oh, I can buy a long way. A long way.
2 rugby league legends in the dressing room with Prince William and a personal presentation of their CBEs.
All the inspirational work you've done, Rob, you've been amazing, you really have.
Kevin Sinfield and Rob Burrow have raised awareness and over £15 million for motor neurone disease.
I can honestly say that I never set out to be an inspiration. I just wanted to try and help other people in a similar situation to me. I am just trying to live my best life with the cards that I've been dealt.
They were partners on the pitch, now known for their friendship and fundraising. And this memorable moment crossing the finishing line of the Leeds Marathon.
It's important that we show people we love and care about that we're willing to stand with them, and the best way of me doing that is through putting myself through a bit of pain and doing a bit of running.
Should they have been knighted? Some thought so, but this still meant a lot.
Thank you very much. Such a really special day, and a day that we'll treasure forever and remember as a family. They deserve a knighthood, but this is just such a huge privilege as well. So to receive this, is such an honour.
Oh, you're so sweet, guys. Thank you so much. And look, it's the book.
And from Rob's 3 children, presents for William's 3. Who gets honoured can be controversial. But here, with their families, Rob and Kevin, rightful recipients. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Jack Elson from The Sun and Kezia Dugdale from the University of Glasgow's John Smith Centre. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the potential military action in the Middle East, the Daily Mail's headline. UK blitz warning to Iran. More on that when we come back. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. British forces are on the brink of military action against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels after Rishi Sunak briefed his cabinet tonight. A Post Office investigator has denied any knowledge of faulty accounting software at the inquiry into the scandal, which saw hundreds of people wrongly prosecuted. And South Africa has accused Israel of genocide against Palestinians at the International Court of Justice and called for an end to military operations in Gaza. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Jack Elsom from The Sun and Kezia Dugdale from the University of Glasgow's John Smith Centre. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the expectation of UK and US forces striking Iranian-backed Houthi rebels from Yemen who've been targeting shipping in the Red Sea makes the lead in the eye. The Guardian too says both countries are poised to launch airstrikes at any moment. Likewise, The Times, airstrikes on Houthis after strife in Red Sea. The Financial Times, meanwhile, reports that Iran has raised the threat to shipping in the Middle East by its seizure of an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. The Mail says the strikes would serve as a warning to Iran over its backing of the Houthis. The Metro leads with the news that former England football manager Sven-Göran Eriksson has terminal cancer, with the headline, "I have a year to live and I appreciate every day." That story is also the main item in tomorrow's Daily Star. The Mirror pictures Prince William with rugby heroes Rob Burrow and Kevin Sinfield, who've received CBEs for their fundraising for motor neurone disease. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Jack Elsom from The Sun and Kezia Dugdale from the University of Glasgow's John Smith Centre. Welcome to you both. Let's start with The Guardian and this story developing tonight. We know there's been the full cabinet call with Rishi Sunak, which we presume has now ended, the result of which we don't know. But the headline in The Guardian saying that Britain and the US are poised to launch strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. Take us into this story first of all, Jack.
Well, yes, most papers tonight banking on airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen by British and American forces within the next few hours, we understand. You don't hold a late-night cabinet meeting, square the lead of the opposition, call in the Speaker of the House of Commons unless you are going to use military action immediately. And I think this is really the inevitable point now after those warnings, those final warnings from not just Britain, not just the US, but about 12 Western countries against the Houthis in Yemen, telling them to stop their attacks on the Red Sea. Those have been unheeded. There's been 27 attacks now on these ships going through that vital shipping route. And so I think that this was the logical conclusion. The West now has to have that projection of strength, try and make the Houthis stop. And I think, obviously, the inevitable question now is, what's Iran's reaction going to be to all this?
Kezia, do you think military action is inevitable at this point?
I think given the week that we've seen, the answer is undoubtedly yes. So just as Jack describes, there's been 27 incidences. 21 of those incidences were on Tuesday night, which is what led to the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps yesterday to say, basically, enough is enough, watch this space. Today started with a meeting of COBRA, followed by the National Council. Now we've seen the Cabinet all on a call. So something very serious and significant is undoubtedly about to happen.
And Jack, we hear reports that the Houthis say that in order for them to stop their attacks in the Red Sea, what they're calling for in their support of Hamas and Palestinians is that there be a ceasefire. This is unlikely to force America, the UK and others to actually call for a ceasefire, is it?
Completely, and I think that they are just going against and any desired effect of what they want, I think, is just going to be set back by their actions here. There is no way that the West is going to change their international position on Israel after ships going through that quite vital shipping lane are attacked by them. And I think that what they need to do now, and what they're definitely almost certainly going to do in the next few hours, the US and Britain, is launch those airstrikes. And, you know, this is a critical shipping route for many people. You know, 20% now of... 20% less ships are going through this vital shipping lane. Having to go around the Horn of Africa is just adding millions of pounds onto these trade routes. And what it's doing is pushing up prices for people in the UK. And if you think for 1 second that this is just some far-flung conflict going on in the Middle East, that's not going to happen because, you know, prices on the shelves go up for this. It's a really big issue and it's going to be dominating the headlines for the next few days.
But, Kezia, any military intervention, any military action taken by the US and the UK is going to escalate the wider conflict in the area and will cause contagion. It's only going to get worse.
Oh, absolutely, and you can see that in The Guardian, where you have the leader of the Iran-backed group, which controls the north and west of Yemen, a guy called Abdul al-Houthi, saying basically any American attack will not remain without a response, pointing very quickly, if you hit us, we'll hit you back. And the question is, to what extent does this escalate? To what extent does Britain want to get involved into this? Is this one-day action and it's going to lead to weeks or months of action? And actually, that will be why a lot of people will be wondering tonight whether the Prime Minister is right to do this largely on his own, and having just made a few critical phone calls, might it be the case that Parliament needs to come back and discuss some of these issues? Will that happen tomorrow? Will that be something that waits until next week? I think we need to wait and see.
Jack, this is a huge test for Rishi Sunak's premiership, isn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, it's the first military action he is launching as Prime Minister. It's a huge moment for any Premier with those positions and with those tools at his disposal. And obviously he'll be consulting his cabinet on that tonight. Obviously the question of Parliament, he doesn't need Parliament to launch military action. There was a precedent set in 2011 with Libya. But obviously you would expect, and what you're seeing MPs call for tonight is that parliamentary cohesion around it, and I think that will only grow louder in the coming days. MPs wanting a say on this, even though potentially, obviously, you can't stop military action because you might want to consult Parliament beforehand. Obviously, these things are immediate pressures. However, in the coming days, you're going to want to see MPs being consulted on this, and that's the clamour which I think we're going to have, and we're already starting to see coming over.
But Kezia, as Jack says, the decision can be taken tonight. I mean, possibly could have already been taken. We don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And we've already seen some of our ships use the capacity that they have already to bring down missiles and drones that have been attacking these commercial vessels in the Strait. What we're considering now is slightly different, though. This is about airstrikes. From what I can read in these articles on land, these are about military targets in Yemen where the Houthis are based. That is a significantly different thing, requiring different assets to be released. The question then, though, is to what extent are we attacking these bases? What are the targets? I think we're right to expect a degree of scrutiny and debate about just how far we're about to lean into this with the Americans by our side, what other countries will join us, how significant a story is this going to become. It's really interesting that the Houthis are describing that their focus is on tackling ships which have connections to Israel and trying to frame it as part of the Israel-Gaza conflict, when really for the Western countries, this is an economic issue. This is about trade and the access to that strait, and it will be trying to protect that shipping channel that will be the foremost of Western countries' priorities.
Jack, interesting point that Kezia makes about targets, because if you're going inland, presumably civilians might be casualties in any attack.
Yes, and obviously I think the West will try incredibly hard to minimise civilian casualties. The question obviously is, where do they attack? Is this naval port routes, which they've been using to mount these attacks? And then what happens next? Is this going to be a one-off attack, which is almost designed to send a message to the Houthi rebels? Is it going to escalate into a wider campaign? Will it drag in Iran? These are all questions which tonight we are still searching for, are going to come clearer through the fog of war in the next few hours and days. But they're critical questions which I think we're going to need answers on tomorrow, because so far tonight we have obviously got things out of government, we know there's a cabinet meeting, but apart from that, the details remain pretty scant, and I think that is what a lot of MPs and obviously the public are going to be calling for tomorrow morning. Yeah, certainly speculation tonight, as you say. The Eye saying that targets would most likely include ports where boats are used by Yemen rebels, where they're
their base. So they're suggesting that the targets would be actually the ports used by the Houthi rebels. Let's move on to the I. No, we've just done the I. The FT you want to get on to. You mentioned Iran and really what sort of role they're playing in all of this, Kezia.
Yes, so this is interesting. This is describing the seizure of an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. So this is a different part of the Gulf Street, a different part of the shipping channels that we've been discussing so far tonight, which points to a wider issue here about what's happening in the broader region and Iran's overall role in controlling different facets of that region. And that should make us more worried, in fact, that this isn't just a one-off issue about a number of rebels in Yemen, that this is much broader, it's much more orchestrated, and that it could escalate much faster than we're perhaps prepared for.
Yeah, speaking to a commentator tonight, they're suggesting that potentially this could even see an attack on Iran, because we know that they are financially backing the Houthis.
Yes, completely. I mean, this is not seizures of the sort of Somali pirate ilk. These are trained rebels who are very well armed, very well financed by Iran. And let's not forget, Iran is a massively armed power in the Middle East, and I think that any conflict which drags them in is going to be really, really worrying for a lot of people. And, you know, it poses the whole question about what is going to happen after these strikes. Is it going to be that signal message? Is it going to be a wider mission in Yemen, potentially dragging in Iran? At the moment, Iran is pretty happy by disrupting stuff in the Middle East. You know, if Britain and America are having to pay through the nose for sort of longer shipping routes, they're going to be absolutely laughing. We know they don't like the West. We know they're happy to disrupt. And I think that the question now is what happens going forward. If it does drag in Iran, that is going to be very, very concerning for a lot of people.
Well, if the US and the UK attack the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, then it stands to reason that Iran will become further involved. Do you not think, Kezia?
It's a sentence full of common sense and inevitability about it. And I think that's why we should be concerned about the democratic oversight here. This decision to take these strikes in the next 24 hours is right and just, of course it is, but we also need to put it in the context of what happens next. We've got clear indications, we've had them from days from the Yemeni rebels, that any sort of retaliation from US and UK forces will see something in return as well. So this is really scary, dangerous times for us all.
And do you both think that the US and the UK would be justified in going ahead with airstrikes on the Houthis? Jack, you first.
Well, it seems that they are comfortable with their position. It seems that tonight Rishi Sunak has probably authorised that military action, obviously unconfirmed at the moment, but we are expecting that in the next few hours. I think pressure would then mount for a UN resolution to continue this operation. Obviously, that can't be done at the drop of a hat, and that's why obviously the US and the UK, having talks tonight, feel probably quite comfortable in their position. However, if this is going to continue, then I think that obviously a UN resolution might be sought.
And do you think that they would be right, or do you think that they should show some restraint?
It makes sense to me that limited action should be taken to protect a route which contains 15% of our global maritime trade business. That's a very different story from one we could be discussing in 2 weeks' time, which is about wider escalation of conflict in the Middle East fuelled by conflict with Iran. The question for me is, how does one day's action take you closer to that, and whether we've really talked about that enough and what this might mean in the future.
Indeed. OK, well, we'll leave it there for the moment. Kezia and Jack, thank you for the moment. Do stay right where you are. Coming back, much more on the press preview. We'll have more on the front pages, including this in The Guardian, with the headline, Post Office investigator acted like a gangster. Stay with us for more on that and other stories.
When you make a record, there's copyright split in two. There's the publishing, which is almost like the sheet music, and then there's the masters, which is the tapes or whatever they store them on now. And so what happened to Taylor Swift is her first 6 albums she recorded with one record label. That record label then was bought by somebody else. And the contract she had with them meant they owned the master tapes of those first records. And she wasn't terribly pleased about the transfer of ownership. She didn't get a chance, she said, to bid for them herself. So she's decided to re-record the first 6 records, and I think she's 4 into that project. so that she kind of diminishes the values of the early one because there's these new shiny versions to replace them.
And her fans are, you know, such huge fans, the Swifties, that they'll sort of boycott the original one would presume.
Well, I presume they listen to both. I mean, last year she released Midnights, which was like a brand new record, but 1989, the Taylor's version, was one of the best-selling records of the year as well, despite already existing sort of several years hence. So, I mean, it's from a kind of control point of view, it obviously shows the power that she's gathered in the music industry. But from a commercial point of view, it's working out pretty well as well. They're able to say, look, Taylor Swift has, you know, got the new contract that Taylor Swift then signed with Universal, her latest record label. She has effectively licensed the record, so that label only owned the records for a set amount of time. Artists like Olivia have been able to go, well, we want the same kind of deal. And obviously, if you're selling lots of records or you've got the potential to sell billions of streams, labels will go, OK, we can do that because we will be able to earn back the money we're going to invest in you quite quickly. I think it's further down the food chain when you get smaller artists where there's a lot of... It's harder for artists to say, we want to own the records, because the labels are saying, well, we might never make our money back on you. So.
And what's she doing?
Well, she's on BMG, who has a label who have sort of decided to go down this licensing route where, you know, they only own the records for a few times. So they're working with people like Kylie and Sigur Rós and acts like that, where they go, we'll own it for a set amount of time, but ultimately you'll get your record back, which I think from an artist's point of view, it means you've got a longevity of your career, you can do stuff with it. And also you've got control of the records, because I mean, one of the big problems is people, you know, as you had with Prince, when he was signed to Warner's and he had a 6-album deal, and he thought he could release 2 albums a year and be out of this deal very quickly, and Warner's were like, well, hang on, we're not going to release an album every 2 albums a year because there's going to be too many records on the market, and that led to his sort of infamous contract dispute with them where he changed his name to the symbol and wrote slave on his face. Yeah, exactly. And so at least with an artist, they feel they're going to get their rights back and they're going to own their records. They then can be a lot more confident going forward that these records, they'll be able to control what happens to them.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, the Sun's Jack Elsom and Kezia Dugdale from the John Smith Centre. Let's continue going through the papers, and we'll turn now from the Middle East to the Post Office inquiry and start with The Guardian. Today, Stephen Bradshaw, the Post Office investigator, was questioned himself. The phrase that came out is that he's been accused of acting like a mafia gangster. Kezia.
Yes, I mean, this has been the dominant domestic political story of the week, and we've got evidence here from a guy called Stephen Bradshaw who's worked for the Post Office since 1978. So that's an extraordinary length of service doing the job that he was doing. The main story here in The Guardian, however, is that this guy has admitted to the inquiry that people were offered lesser charges if they were prepared to stay silent about accusing the Horizon system of being faulty in some way. That's really significant. That was a core part of the documentary that millions of us or drama that millions of us have watched over the past few weeks, that was so critical to so many people losing their livelihoods and having the most desperate time for decades. This suggestion that the Horizon IT system at the heart of their post offices was faulty. They were being told, if you basically shut up about this, we can get you off with a lesser charge. This guy's admitted this to the inquiry today, and that's hugely significant.
But Jackie also denied being heavy-handed in terms of his language when dealing with people.
Yeah, completely. And over the past few weeks, we've seen the heroes of these scandals really come out. And now we're seeing the villains laid out in the full public glare. A lot of what we saw, especially laid out in that ITV drama, was these sort of intimidatory tactics used by a lot of these investigators. Now, it was put to him that he acted like a mafia gangster mobster in pursuing these postmasters. He has come out and refuted that and said that he didn't act in that sort of manner. However, I think that in these spiky exchanges today, a lot of people who have watched that drama and seen the subsequent fallout from it will be thinking, well, actually, you know, what we saw on our TV screens, which was a real-life drama, and I think that people will really sort of think, actually, potentially, you know, that may not be just the whole truth.
We also heard him deny that he had said to people that they were the only ones in coming forward and having glitches and having problems with the Horizon system.
Yeah, that's really interesting because he's clearly been caught out and kind of proven a number of other facets to this case in the evidence he gave to the inquiry today, but denied that particular instance, which was a core part of the TV dramatisation, the suggestion that every time a post office investigator was in front of a sub-postmistress or master, they were saying, "No, it's only you, you're the only one that's ever complained about this." And he still stood behind that sentiment today and said he had never suggested that they were the only one. Looking at the Mail, though, actually, there's a lot more background detail, and just picking up on Jack's point about these bullying tactics. What I thought was extraordinary about his evidence today was that one of the victims, or one of the sub-postmistresses, Shazia Sadiq, actually sat next to her lawyer and listened to this guy give evidence for the whole day. And she's on record saying that this guy phoned her 60 separate times as evidence of the bullying and intimidation that she faced. And the strength and courage it must have taken to eyeball that guy and listen to this for hours today is really quite extraordinary. And it speaks to the phenomenal campaigning efforts and resilience that hundreds of these people who worked as dedicated public services in our post offices for decades have shown, fighting for justice and fighting for what's right.
The Times are pointing to recordings that prove the post office knew about the IT problems, which is crucial and at the crux of this whole issue, isn't it, Jack?
Completely. And one of the most shocking, staggering pieces of information from Bradshaw's testimony today was that actually when he signed a statement saying that he didn't have any problems with the Horizon scandal, that was actually written for him by a law firm. I think people find that absolutely shocking that he himself didn't do that and was told exactly what to put. We now know that obviously Horizon was completely faulty and led to these shortfalls in the post office. And I think that anyone that thought that yesterday's statement by Rishi Sunak for compensation drew a line under this is going to be mistaken, because there is a huge scandal here and people will rightly want to know exactly what happened, get to the bottom of it. And yes, if people deserve to be punished over that, then that punishment should take its course of action.
Yeah, more and more being revealed day by day. Jack and Kezia, thank you very much for the moment. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.